There we go. Now you're set.
So thanks for joining me today. I'm Dr. Walter Morton. I am a optometrist. I practice in Centennial, Colorado, in a practice named Buckeye Vision Care. And I'm here to go ahead and kind of tell you what a career in optometry is all about and how you would go about preparing yourself and set yourself on a path towards optometry school in about 4 more years. So I'm guessing any number of you have had your eyes checked by the local optometrist or local eye doctor. Fair number of you probably end up wearing glasses, wear contact lenses. So probably you have a fairly good idea of what you think we end up doing on a day-to-day basis. But let me kind of give you just a general overall definition of what an optometrist does. Optometrists diagnose, manage, and treat conditions and diseases of the human eye and visual system. And I honestly have spent the last 32 years in the practice of optometry practicing to do that. They don't call it the practice of medicine, the practice of dentistry, the practice of medicine without good reason. We're constantly striving to become better doctors and to go ahead and end up using our knowledge to do a better job for patients. So what you guys typically see when you go to the eye doctor is us prescribing glasses, contact lenses, but we also end up treating eye disease with prescription eye drops for pink eye, glaucoma, perform minor eye surgery, as well as do vision therapy, which is a type of therapy to go ahead and strengthen eye muscle coordination. You can almost kind of think of it as doing physical therapy for the eyes. In some states in the United States, we're also able to go ahead and end up doing laser treatments. So quick anatomy lesson for all of you. Some of you may have taken an eye dissection class back in elementary school or middle school, but the sunburst area here in the center of the photograph, that is actually the optic nerve. That is the part of the eye that ultimately connects to your brain, and in fact, anatomically, it is just an extension of your brain. You can see the blood vessels here, the veins and the arteries, and then off to the side here to the left, the black spot is actually the macula, and that is where the majority of your central vision takes place. That's the part that you use to go ahead and read with, go ahead and recognize your friends in the hallway, and it's the area where the cones are concentrated primarily. So the rest of the area actually ends up being more for your peripheral vision. That has the cells that are called the rods. And then the optic nerve anatomically is actually the blind spot in the eye. So you don't actually have any vision there, although your brain never perceives it as being a true blind spot unless you're using just one eye individually. One of the things that we end up dealing with on a day-to-day basis as eye doctors is diabetes. Up until COVID, this really was kind of considered almost a, don't want to say a pandemic, but more of an epidemic in the United States because of the rising incidences. Few unfortunate statistics. Close to 10% of the US population had diabetes back in 2014. Close to about 30% of the people are actually not diagnosed. It is the leading cause of blindness in the United States, and it's one of the first organs to be affected by diabetes. Other causes of blindness that we are trying to go ahead and diagnose and treat: macular degeneration, glaucoma, cataracts, and amblyopia, which is also known as a lazy eye. So for better or for worse, with the aging of America, optometry will go ahead and really have a large future going forward as a career. A lot of different ways that optometrists can practice. As I said earlier, I'm actually in a private practice. I'm a single doctor in a small practice. I've got about 4 or 5 employees. Other modes of practice, partnerships, group practice, HMOs like Kaiser. There are clinic settings where there are optometrists and ophthalmologists working together. Military, public health, you can be an Air Force optometrist and actually have them pay for your 4 years of schooling. interdisciplinary care, where you're working with other physicians. Good example of that would be Craig Hospital, where you are working with neurologists, neurosurgeons, and physical therapists all together in a group setting. Academia, research with larger corporations such as pharmaceutical companies or contact lens companies, and then also corporate or retail settings such as lens crafters or vision works. So in terms of a career, we've got kind of superior career forecasts. One of the 13 best careers in the decade from 2010 to 2020, according to Kiplinger. And if you look at CNN, optometrist ends up making one of the 100 best jobs in America. And I think we came in somewhere between number 10 or 20, actually number 12. So in my humble opinion, it's a great career choice. It offers a wonderful profession where you can go ahead and end up balancing your work and your family life and still make a decent income. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated to go ahead and end up having positions for optometrists grow about 24%. I don't know whether it grew quite that fast in that decade. It was probably closer to about 20%, but it will continue to go ahead and grow just because of the graying America, and also the fact that a lot of the medical insurance plans, the health insurances, now do include vision care as well. So why is optometry a good choice? One of the nice things is one-on-one helping in a career where we really end up getting almost instant gratification. We end up helping patients to see, and over time, we develop relationships with patients. I've seen some of my patients for going on 25 years or so. We've got the opportunity to go ahead and work with all different ages of patients. As I mentioned earlier, great work-life balance, flexibility in scheduling, very little in the way of emergency calls, although I do go in on weekends on occasion to remove foreign bodies or for a pink eye or conjunctivitis. Fairly large scope of practice, which allows us to go ahead and prescribe therapeutic drugs. It's really a pleasant professional work environment, and it's not overly physically demanding. We've really got a long professional life. It's not unusual for me to go ahead and end up seeing an infant at the age of 6 months in the morning, and sometimes see their great grandparents in the afternoon who are 95 years old. So it is truly a wide range of patients that I end up seeing. So the question you're all probably asking yourself is, what about compensation? Latest figures that I had was from about 2016. Average net income from the primary practice of optometry was just about $160,000. So that kind of gives you a range, gives you an idea of what the reimbursement would end up being during the course of a year. So if you are actually interested in going kind of on a pre-optometry track, it's not all that much different than what you would end up doing for pre-med or pre-dentistry. At the high school level, you're going to be taking the higher level science classes. You'll be taking the higher level math classes, AP courses, physics. Once you end up getting into college for your undergraduate, I can't emphasize enough the fact that you do not have to be a science major. A large number of people are. You can be zoology major, which is ironically what I was, biology major. But I also have colleagues who have an undergraduate degree in the classics, English majors. But the key is you have to go ahead and end up knocking out these prerequisite courses, which are listed here. They're all kind of intuitive: general biology, gen chem, OChem, general physics with labs, micro, calculus, psych, statistics, and English. Each one of the colleges of optometry has their own specific requirements. One of the interesting things about optometry is you can actually end up getting into optometry school in some cases with just 3 years of undergraduate if you're able to go ahead and end up taking care of all these prerequisite courses. I myself did 4 years of undergraduate. Most people do 4 years, but it's not an absolute requirement. So let me go ahead and move on to the next slide here. For optometrists, it's a 4-year degree. Your first and second year, really kind of the basic sciences, preclinical, the first year of patient care, somewhere about halfway through your second year of optometry school. Third year, typically, you're going to be doing specialty courses with direct patient contact. In fourth year, you would be doing rotations either through hospital setting, externships, and then there's actually the opportunity, should you want to kind of subspecialize, in doing a residency. Most residencies would be a 1-year duration. Some are 2. These residencies are located within hospitals, VA facilities, and allow you to dive in a little bit deeper into pediatrics, geriatrics, contact lens and cornea research, low vision rehabilitation, which really ends up meaning patients who have a reduced level of vision, where you assist them even to the point where they're legally blind. We have magnifiers and other things that can help these patients. Vision therapy and binocular vision, and also sports vision. So lots of opportunities if you want to go ahead and end up doing additional training and end up subspecializing a little bit. So kind of in summary, it's a well-respected profession with a great future job outlook, great potential salary and work-life balance, a lot of different modes of practice. If you want to get a little bit better handle on the specific requirements for colleges of optometry, there's a website listed here, www.opted.org. And at the end of the presentation, I'll go ahead and put up my personal email, and you can go ahead and send some questions to me if you want to go ahead and reach out that way, as well as opposed to using this particular website.
Thank you.
So I thought I would go ahead and just kind of do a little bit of trivia associated with the eye, just kind of mix it up, kind of useless information that I thought that you guys might end up enjoying. Let me kind of scroll through some of these slides here. Actually, this usually comes through as a video presentation, but I don't think it's going to click on, so I'll just click on the individual slides.
Nice.
Wonderful. So, useless trivia. The human eye can distinguish about 10 million different colors. So you're not going to find all of these in a Crayola crayon box. But if you kind of want to get an idea, go to Home Depot, look at the color paint cards, look at the color palettes that they have. There are millions of different shades, hues, and brightnesses that the human eye can go ahead and end up perceiving. Some women actually have a genetic mutation, which will allow them to go ahead and see millions of more colors. There are probably about 8% of the men in the population that are what we would consider colorblind, and I really kind of dislike that term. They're not truly colorblind, but they have a color deficiency, and they're not able to go ahead and end up perceiving reds and greens the same way that you and I would go ahead and perceive it. So they'll still call a red light red, they'll call a green light green, but their perception of it is actually quite a bit different, but they can still end up calling those colors appropriately. So later on in life, if you are a male and your wife tells you that something doesn't match in terms of colors, go ahead and take her word for it. She's probably right.
So Dr. Morton, we have a sofa in our family room, and I would swear to you up and down that this sofa is dark brown. And everyone who comes into contact with it, including my wife, is like, no, it's gray. It's a dark charcoal gray. Is that? And I mean, it's my wife, so I'm not going to argue with her. But I also have other friends that have come over and said, no, it's dark gray. And I swear I see it as brown.
Well, that's a pretty subtle difference, but ironically, there's a couple of slides towards the end of the presentation that actually kind of address the perception of black in contrast and kind of visual noise. So maybe you've got a little visual noise going on, Mr. Stirrup.
I just know my wife's smarter than me, so if she says it's a color, she wins. I'm not going to argue.
I would disagree. I would say that you're a very bright man because you're not arguing with your wife. So you're a smart man that you're giving yourself credit for. So I think you're spot on in terms of IQ and intelligence there.
Oh, thank you. It's the nicest thing someone said to me all month.
Well, I'm hoping your wife is still seated there, so, nearby. So I'm putting in kudos for you. Blue eyes tend to be more sensitive to light, not just visible light, but also ultraviolet light. So just like fair-skinned patients will go ahead and sunburn much more easily, damage can occur with blue eyes from ultraviolet light. It's one of the reasons that we as eye doctors here in Colorado really end up harping on people wearing sunglasses, because just as ultraviolet light tends to go ahead and cause long-term damage to our skin, causing skin cancer, it can cause long-term problems to our eyes, things such as cataracts, macular degeneration. So even if you don't end up wearing something in the way of sunglasses, even just a baseball cap to go ahead and cut down on the amount of UV radiation is a really good idea out here. So next slide, a little creepy. Albert Einstein's eyes actually are in a safe box in New York City. So as many of you probably already know, his brain was preserved just because of his level of intelligence. They wanted to go ahead and find out what made this man tick. But ironically, the pathologist who did the autopsy, Dr. Harvey, actually gave Albert's eyeballs to his eye doctor, Dr. Abrams. And as I said, that just strikes me as a little bit creepy. I really, I love my patients dearly, but I have no desire to go ahead and put them in my lockbox at Wells Fargo in the next month or so. What's next here? Researchers have successfully used video games in the past to go ahead and treat a lazy eye in adults. Lazy eye is also sometimes known as amblyopia. And in terms of what a lazy eye is, again, it's one of those terms, it's kind of a layperson's term. A lazy eye doesn't just mean that you have an eye that wanders, i.e. an eye that turns out or turns inward. Sometimes we'll end up having patients that will develop a lazy eye because there's such a difference between the amount of nearsightedness or farsightedness in one eye versus the other, or they have a significant amount of astigmatism. If you think back to when you were in elementary school with some of your classmates, there may have been the young man or young woman in first or second grade that was actually wearing a patch over an eye. And oftentimes this is how we as eye doctors treat a lazy eye. We actually end up patching the good eye to force the lazy eye to work more efficiently and to lay down the neurons, the connections between the eyeball and the brain to go ahead and form. The challenge is diagnosing these patients at a young enough age because there's a period of formation, what we call a period of plasticity, that after about age 7 or so, it becomes much, much more challenging to go ahead and treat these lazy eyes. So that's why we make a real effort to go ahead and get these patients diagnosed at an early age. Totally useless bit of trivia. An ostrich's eye is much bigger than its brain. Not that you've probably interacted with ostriches a great deal in your lifetimes, but if you've ever visited Australia or been to the zoo or been around a petting zoo, they are not the brightest of birds. So this is completely borne out with my limited experience of ostriches. Goldfish can't close their eyes as they have absolutely no eyelids. There are a few exceptions to the rule on this, but most fish do not actually have eyelids. It's not just the goldfish. And fish obviously very well adapted to that because their eyes are kept moist all the time with the seawater. not so well adapted to being out of water, out in the air, because their corneas would go ahead and end up drying out. The fact that they don't have eyelids do not mean that they can't go to sleep. You don't have to be able to close your eyes to go to sleep, but they constantly have their eyes open and they do go ahead and sleep. Those of you who have fish tanks know that they just kind of bob up and down a little bit. We spend close to about 10% of our waking hours with our eyes closed, blinking. So researchers have estimated that the average person blinks probably about 15 to 20 times a minute, about 1,200 times per hour, and believe it or not, about 28,000 times a day. It's actually a whole lot more than what we need to do to keep our eyes lubricated, but it's actually come up quite a bit clinically for me in the last 4 months or so because of students having to go ahead and end up doing their classes virtually, staring at monitors, and with your parents working on computer monitors. The reason that this becomes more important is we naturally, as we're working on a digital device, our blink rate decreases by about 40 to 60%. And if you think of your eyelids as working like little windshield wipers, recoating your eyes with the tear film, you staring at the monitor by the end of the day is what's going to be causing your eyes to feel like they're kind of gritty, feel tired, feel like they're burning. Sometimes you'll go ahead and end up noticing that they're actually dry. So it's a challenge during these COVID times to go ahead and keep patients' eyes well lubricated. We recommend artificial tears on a pretty regular basis. Add to that the fact that Denver, Colorado has such low humidity to begin with. I probably end up dispensing samples of artificial tears probably about 6 to 8 times a day. Now we're not talking like the murines or Visines, but actually artificial tears. So if you're noticing some dryness by the end of your 8 hours of schoolwork and then another 3 hours of studying for a Mr. Stirrups class, that could actually be the reason why. So go ahead and get yourself some lubricating drops or have your parents pick them up at Walgreens. So this is actually kind of an esoteric bit of trivia. All blue-eyed people can be traced back to a single person who lived near the Black Sea almost 10,000 years or so ago. Scientists have estimated that there was a mutation that occurred somewhere in the northwest part of the Black Sea region when there was an agricultural migration during the Neolithic time. So somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, they end up saying all blue-eyed patients in the world actually derive from this one single individual because of a genetic mutation. So I think that's kind of cool. Even though I have brown eyes, I think it's cool.
I got blue.
You got blue. There you go. Now you don't have to go ahead and pay the monthly fee to Ancestry.com. You know from whence you came.
Very good.
Kind of back to the goldfish and fish analogy. Dolphins actually sleep with one eye open. And if you remember from your science classes, dolphins are not fish. So dolphins are actually mammals. It's kind of a clever trick. They can actually overcome sleep deprivation and remain vigilant for days at a time by resting one half of their brain's hemisphere while the other half actually remains conscious, and they actually have one eye open opposite of that hemisphere so that they can watch out for potential predators, something like a killer whale, an orca. I don't know what actually ends up killing dolphins in the actual ocean, but I think those are two of the primary ones. So they do have to remain somewhat conscious, and they literally sleep with one eye open. For those of you who are dog people, humans and dogs are the only two species known to seek visual cues from each other's eyes, and dogs only do it with humans. So humans do it with dogs and other humans, but if you feel like your dog is very empathetic, your dog actually has the ability to go ahead and read your facial and eye cues, whereas I'm not a cat hater, I like cats, but if cats seem just a little bit more standoffish, it's because they're not getting those visual cues from looking at you. The eye of a giant squid can measure about the same size as a volleyball ball. I think the record for a giant squid is somewhere around 10.5 inches. And if you think about that and you're watching me at your kitchen table, that's about the size of a large dinner plate. They're not all that large. Most giant squid's eyes are somewhere between 2 to 6 inches in diameter. But regardless, those are pretty huge. And again, a little frightening. Not the sort of thing you want to have in one of your dreams. Completely useless trivia. The space between your eyebrows is called the nasion. Unless you have one of those wonderful unibrows guys, I guess you have no real nasion. The skin between the two eyes is called the glabella, and the nasion, from an anatomical standpoint, is the intersection of the frontal bones and the nasal bones. Bees have 5 eyes, and this one I think I kind of always enjoy finding out about because, as I told you, I was a zoology major in undergraduate. I went to Miami of Ohio, and they did not actually offer a biology degree. I actually have a BA in zoology, so I know way more about entomology and ichthyology and all the ologies than any of you ever really want to know. But the 2 large eyes that you can physically see on a bumblebee are compound eyes, and they're made up with thousands of tiny little facets. If you think about kind of looking at a mosaic floor or a mosaic piece of art, it's almost like how all those little tiles are put together as individual colors, and overall they form a single picture. But the interesting thing is that that picture is not flat. All of the facets are on a different curved surface, the front of the eye. So that means that they can actually end up detecting movement in any direction. Bees don't necessarily see all that well when things are holding still, which is why when you're outside and you see a bee, you're not supposed to be swatting it. You're supposed to be standing still, and they'll go ahead and leave you alone. But the upside to this is that they can go ahead and end up sensing movement, especially something coming from overhead. The other interesting things about bumblebees is that they have the ability to see ultraviolet light. And there's a lot of interesting thoughts as far as this is used to allow them to navigate, to get to hives, to get to flowers with pollen. But they actually have the ability to see a wavelength of light that you and I are not able to. The other 3 eyes, they're called simple eyes, or ocelli. They're at the top of the bee's head, kind of in a triangular pattern. They're very small. You almost really need a microscope to go and spot these. These eyes don't really see the images all that well, but they are able to detect light, and especially changes in light. So if there's a predator coming on down, ready to swoop in and grab them, they're going to know that something is wrong and be able to fly away. So let's go ahead, go on down to the next slide. Chameleons can move their eyes in 2 directions. You can kind of see the zoology theme here, a lot of different things about different animals. Chameleons can move their eyes in 2 different directions at the same time. They do this in a couple of different ways. One is with a little different anatomical specialization that allows the eyes to rotate with a much higher degree of freedom. The second is a chameleon's ability to transition between monocular vision and binocular vision, what we as humans require to go ahead and have better depth perception. So they can go ahead and view objects with either eye independent of each other. So going back on the primate thing and also the blue eyes, black lemurs are thought to be the only other primates besides humans to have blue eyes. For the most part, all mammals have brown or darkly pigmented irises, which is the colored part of your eye. Again, if you guys did dissect cow's eyes back in middle school or elementary school, you remember that they're typically very deep brown. But there are some exceptions to mammals, one of them being the lemur. Not to get too technical, but the black lemur ended up evolving on a separate part of the evolutionary tree from us humans. So the black lemurs are not derived from the same place that we were 10,000 years ago, but they actually developed a rare phenotype, which is a genetic mutation on another part of the primate evolutionary tree. Your eyes can get sunburned. And this is one of the most painful things that we as eye doctors have to go ahead and deal with. There are really more nerves packed into this tiny square inch of your body than anywhere else on your body. Sometimes this will be referred to as snow blindness or welder's flash. And again, this is caused by excessive exposure to ultraviolet radiation, the UV light that you're not able to see. The reason that this happens, if any of you are skiers and you've come across somebody who has developed snow blindness, the reason this happens out in the snow is you're getting a double exposure, very similar to what would happen to you out on a beach. You're getting the ambient ultraviolet light coming down from the sun, and then you're actually getting the reflected light either from the ocean or actually from the snow. So you're getting twice the exposure that you typically would if you're out outside playing in the grass. So again, can't harp on it enough. Be good about wearing the sunglasses. Again, staying with the zoology theme, some lizards can squirt blood out of their eyes as protection against predators. In order to go and ward off some predators, short-horned lizards are capable of inflating their bodies up to about twice their size. They kind of resemble a spiny balloon. And if this isn't enough to go ahead and scare off a potential predator, they have the ability to go and eject blood from a sac adjacent to their eye. It's not actually out of their eyes per se, but kind of a bizarre defensive mechanism that they've developed, shooting blood from their eyes. So since I gave dogs their due, cats have 3 eyelids. There's an inner eyelid of cats, more properly termed the palpebra tertia, also known as the nictitating membrane. The third eyelid of cats play a pretty important role in maintaining the eye health. And the ironic thing is, it's actually important enough that most mammals and birds have a third eyelid. We're actually the exception in the animal kingdom in that we only have the 2 eyelids. Some of our other primates also have only 2 eyelids as well. So we're kind of the oddity in that case. This next one, I'm not sure I completely believe, because it seems like this past week, I was able to go ahead and sneeze while I was driving about 65 miles an hour on E470, and I was able to keep one eye open. I've never been able to go ahead and sneeze with both eyes open simultaneously, so I may have to do some more research on that one. And
so they won't pop out of your head?
No, they have not. They did not pop out of the head. I have no idea why that's a evolutionary thing, but yeah, try it the next time you try to sneeze, and it's very challenging to keep both eyes open. So the human eye, if it were a digital camera, would have close to about 576 megapixels. Just to go ahead and give you an idea, that would end up equating to your iPhone 11. And I believe that has just about 11 or 12 megapixels in the camera. So much higher resolution even than what your iPhone ends up having. For those of you that were fortunate enough to pick up an iPhone 11 in the last year, I think probably just like Mr. Stirrup, I think I'm still walking around with my iPhone 6. So
mine doesn't even have a number on it.
Still got the flip phone?
The next generation right after that, though.
Okay, that's good. Completely useless trivia. Eigengrau, brain gray, is the color your eyes actually see in total darkness. So what we call visual noise or background noise, it's actually more of a gray color. It's not the black that we would go ahead and think about seeing when we're looking at a night sky. The reason for that is when you're looking up at the night sky, your brain processes it differently because you've got the stars to go ahead and compare and contrast to it. Whereas if you are in a completely dark room, the brain has nothing to compare it to in terms of contrast. So it's not a true black that you're perceiving in your visual cortex. It's more of what they call a brain gray or Eigengrau. I think that's a German term, pretty sure, Germanic. And then for those of you thinking about going into the military or into the special forces, the reason the night vision goggles are green is because the human eye can differentiate more shades of green than any other color. So that's why everything looks so green. That is by design. So if any of you have, any additional questions as far as optometry, about the presentation, anything that I glossed over or some of the requirements, that's my personal email, buckeye@pcisys.net. Feel free to shoot me an email. I may not get back to you the same day, but I'm pretty darn good about responding to email. So feel free to it, and I'll be happy to get back in touch with you. So that's really kind of all the presentation that I had today. One of the disadvantages to doing this virtually is I don't get to go ahead and end up seeing the responses of your guys as to know when you're falling asleep, which actually did happen quite a bit since the class used to be, at 6:45 last year? 6:45 a.m.?
So when Pete Baker and I first started the class, we did it for about 7 years. It was 6 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay.
And then we switched it to 2 of the days was 6:30 to 7:30, and 2 of the days was 7 to 8. And then we switched it to 3 days a week to be 7 to 8:10. And I think that's what we've done. But of course, I hope Pete Baker's looking down on us now, because I think he'd be really proud that this class is at 4 different schools in the district. And
that's right. I remember you told me that they're at Arapahoe as well, and then which other two?
So Arapahoe High School had started it in Littleton Public Schools, and then I got the idea with Pete Baker because he had spoken at it since 1974, and we opened it at Chaparral High School, and then 6 years ago we moved it to Cherry Creek High School. So I run it at Cherry Creek High School. Another gentleman runs it over at Smoky Hill High School. A young lady runs it at Cherokee Trail High School, and another young lady also run it at Overland High School. I'm not sure if Chaparral High School still has it or not. The lady who did take it over, she has left, and I'm not quite sure. I have not stayed in connection with that. But
well, the nice thing, are we still recording, Chris? Or
yeah,
are you?
that's
Okay. So the nice thing is, I mean, that is your legacy. I know you're a number of years away from retiring, but the legacy is what will be left behind after you end up retiring, and you planted a seed, and fortunately that has spread to other schools.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I guess technically I have 15 more years, but I don't think I'll stop until I stop having fun. I mean, I enjoy what I do too much, and people say, "Oh, you teachers work way too hard." I don't work a day in my life. I enjoy it way too much. It's too enjoyable for me to classify it as work. So
That's good. So since the students can't respond back to me directly, and I can't read their facial expressions and figure out whether they're sleeping or bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a cup of coffee in their hand, any questions from you? I know you've seen this presentation a few times. It varies a little bit from one year to the next, but
I always love it.
Stuff.
So I have a question on my gray and brown. So this periodic table behind me, I'm seeing these right here as gray color.
You get the doctor's vote of confidence on that one.
Okay. And I see the intertransitional metals as a brown color.
I would agree with you on that, even though you're only about 1 inch by 2 inches wide on my screen. So the other thing that ends up happening, especially with ambient sunlight coming on into the room, change your position to go ahead and end up looking at the couch, look at it from the left side, look at it from the right side. And again, it's all about perception. All the light spectrums coming into your eyes the same way, but from a perceptual standpoint, perhaps you just have a genetic defect that ends up making it look a little bit different.
So my wife has held up, something black next to it, and then she's also held up something brown. And when she holds up the brown, I swear it's a shade of brown, and I cannot see the black, because it's a darker charcoal is what they tell me, but I swear it is a dark brown. And when we were first buying it, I'm like, that's not going to match our room. What are you talking about? It's dark gray. I'm like, it's brown.
Well, I believe this is why Mrs. Stirrup did the majority of the decorating and choosing the paint colors in your house.
Yes,
so,
yes. And I also have recognized when if I come down, if we're gonna go to dinner, Joe, are you wearing that? That that must not go. I should go change.
Or maybe after all these years, you go on back the next time to the eye doctor and have them just do a quick color vision test on you, just to rule that out as a possibility.
Well, very good. So what I'll do is the students, they have your email address, but if they contact me with anything else, I'll also email you to get that information. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop recording button. I just have to find where it went. There it is.